Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call council meeting number 11 for Tuesday, April 9 to order. And just a note that this special open council meeting is to address items I through M that were postponed to today's date from the meeting held April 2. So I will call the meeting to order, recognizing that we meet on the traditional territory of the LHTAKO DENE Nation. And now I would ask for a motion to approve the agenda that is before you. Moved Councillor McKelvey, seconded Councillor Runge. Yes.
Sorry, we just have to amend the agenda to postpone the Prospectors Car Club correspondence.
Okay, did everybody get that? With that postponement? Yeah, okay. Are we okay to vote on it then? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we're not going to, we do not have any minutes to adopt tonight. We have no presentations, no delegations, no items arising from previous special closed meetings, no unfinished reports, but we do have one committee report, March 27, 24, Financial Sustainability and Audit Committee Chair Summary, Councillor Vick.
Thank you, Mayor. So we had a meeting on the 27th, actually a pretty robust meeting. There are some recommendations that will follow. One of them is just for information. We started with a review of the 5-year financial plan policy, which gets reviewed every year. So in this review, there's little to nothing that needs to be changed. But we'll be bringing that back for one more final pass before we make that recommendation. Next, we talked about an update on our reserve balances as of the end of the year, 2023. I've noted a couple highlights in my report. Mainly our water capital reserve is going to see a major project this year, so that reserve will be drawn down quite significantly, but we are building a new well. And then I've made note of the casino reserve. There wasn't any serious expenditures from that reserve last year, and that could be available for a project such as the Johnson Bridge, which we're hoping to know more about in the coming months. We spent quite a significant amount of time talking about the surplus for 2023, but Director Carrie Bolton will be taking that on in her report, so I'm going to leave that for then. Then we talked about some updates from the Finance Department. On the 17th of April, which is coming up next week, the auditors will be in town to discuss our books, so we look forward to that. We also heard from the Mayor regarding a council initiative which was approved by council in March regarding a moose sculpture relocation, and we were updated that the funding that was approved by council is no longer required for that relocation. It will be funded from donations from the community. So there is a motion to follow on that, but basically that expenditure is no longer required. The intention is that when the sculpture comes to Quesnel, Bert DeVink, who is the artist in question, will seek to donate that sculpture to the city, at which point our donation policy comes into effect and we will observe those policies. Next, we talked about electric vehicles. The city now has an electric vehicle, which we were very happy to learn. It's being operated by our building inspector, Kevin Hicks. Unfortunately, we haven't any infrastructure at City Hall to charge an electric vehicle. So it's a bit of a logistical challenge. So currently, Mr. Hicks is charging the vehicle at the visitor center because we have a charger there, but that's not practical. And also it's reasonable to infer that we're probably going to be getting additional electrical vehicles in the future. So it was proposed that an electric charger be installed at City Hall. There's a recommendation to have two parking spots allocated for the project, but only one of them would be made live to charge a vehicle this year. And then based on a staff report on the future of what we believe we need for both staff in the building and tenants who have space in this building, staff will provide a report on what that future is and what the recommendation will be for future construction of other stalls. There is a recommendation to follow the report here. We turned our attention to the lawn bowling facility. The lawn bowling facility at West Fraser Timber Park was returned to the city last year, and the committee discussed the potential options for both the building and the adjacent green space, which was formerly the actual lawn bowling green. The cost of maintaining the building and the green space would be incremental to our public works budget. Alternatively, the space offers a unique opportunity for any number of our nonprofit groups in the community. So a request for interest has gone out asking nonprofits how they might use that space. The committee discussed potential ranking criteria for determining what would be the best fit for the building and possible green space. Once a list of users is finalized, that will come back to council and we will weigh in on that. Lastly, we received a letter from a senior, and the letter was received in response to rising costs of our utilities. The committee empathizes with the challenges that many seniors face due to rising costs, especially in the last couple of years, especially those on fixed government pensions. There are supports for seniors with respect to property taxes. Seniors over 65 receive a larger homeowner grant every year. Seniors over 55 can also defer their property taxes if they meet the qualifications set out by the tax deferral program, which is a provincial program. Offering utility discounts to individuals based on age and income would not be practical, as the city does not have the capacity to collect and verify all the information required for such a discount. The committee determined at this point we would not recommend looking at a specific seniors discount for utilities. So to the recommendations, our first one pertaining to the Moose Sculpture Relocation Program, that FSAC and Audit, FSAC Committee recommends to Council to remove the allocation of up to $5,000 from Council initiatives to move the Moose Sculpture to Quesnel. I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Vic. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Runge, is there City Manager?
Thank you. I think this didn't quite capture the whole resolution. If I could just make a suggestion before it's voted on. The first part of the resolution is great, but I was thinking we could add wording to the effect that, and that the potential donation of the moose sculpture would be made at a future date, subject to council approval at that date. Because really the ownership of the moose stays with the current artist, as the mayor expressed, as opposed to coming to the city, which is why we're not donating funding towards that.
Yeah, I'll take that recommendation and add that into my motion.
We can add that to the existing motion without having to defeat the first one and go with the second one, so everybody understands that the second part of the motion that was enunciated by the city manager will form a part of the resolution. Okay, thank you. And now, is there any further discussion on this before I call the question? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, carry on.
Okay, my second motion here, that FSAC recommends to council that up to $20,000 be used from the carbon neutral reserve, which we have adequate funding for that, to install an electrical charging station in the City Hall parking lot for use by city vehicles. I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Vic. Councillor Elliott, you're seconding? And you have a comment? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question, and I apologize for not being at that meeting, Chair. But out of curiosity, with us getting the new building right outside here and our parking lot shrinking, was there any conversation about the possibility of having these out at Public Works? 4-minute drive gives us more space out here, because I'm not sure how many spaces we're going to actually end up with, and that's just going to take 2 more away.
That's a fair comment, Councillor Elliott. I would suggest that that would be incremental to this request, only because the staff in the building may require a charging solution, but we must consider that the tenants in the building, as time marches on with the prevalence of EV vehicles, they may need somewhere to charge too. So I hear the concern, and I would only suggest that we let staff come back to us with a recommendation in a reality where we have less parking, period. So I'm not sure where that will go.
Councillor Runge?
Actually, I like that recommendation, Councillor Elliott. I also would like to add to this. I believe that as we move forward in the EV space, we have to be very careful that we don't subsidize the people that purchase a vehicle at a higher cost, which are generally people with higher income. We have to be very careful that, like, I'd actually like to see a pay station, and it's okay if we give the pay to the city because we're just giving it to ourselves, but if someone's coming in to just use it, I don't think we should be subsidizing electric vehicles just for the sake of subsidizing electric vehicles. I think progressing forward, we have to look at it kind of like fuel. We pay for it. We pay for it with city taxes. We pay, if they get used every single day, that cost could add up to most likely $20,000 or $30,000 a year, depending on what type of vehicle is being plugged into it. And I think we have to really consider that in our recommendation also going forward. Not that I'm against it. I just think no matter, and that's why I actually like Councillor Elliott's suggestion of putting it at City Works, because that would actually clean up that we're actually paying for it with city vehicles that are using it, and we're not subsidizing someone in a parking lot that comes into the parking lot just to use it if it's not with a pay as you use facility option.
Thank you, Councillor Runge. Now I'm going to go to Councillor Vic.
Yeah, it's a good comment, Councillor. This phase of the project would be to build one charger just to address the fact that we have an electric vehicle in our fleet that it's awkward to charge it since currently that employee is based in this building. However, we did bring up your point that future expansion of those parking stalls with electrical chargers, we definitely conveyed to Director Coben that we may require locks, a way to activate them to charge, and there would be a fee. So certainly this is the very beginning of the journey just to address the need we have today. So future expansion would encompass everything that you've just suggested.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Vic. Do I have any more comments, questions? Councillor Runge.
So I just need, I guess, some clarification from the city manager. So the current EV vehicle is a Hyundai Kona?
Thank you. I'm not exactly sure the brand of the vehicle. I know it's a little white electric vehicle out there being used by the building inspector.
Okay, so then just adding to that. So the question is, are we able to, with limited facilities, because a lot of these vehicles hook into home systems with a slower charge, with a adapter that plugs into the wall, are we able to lower this cost right now as we figure out what's going on? Or is this, because this option right now is currently at, I believe, a fast charge station, the 20,000 one?
I just got to point out, Director Coben did a lot of research. He looked into all these various issues and he picked this one, that this was the one that would work for the building inspector, for them to be able to charge overnight, to be able to go and work during the day. So he's put a lot of effort. Him and our capital projects supervisor are putting a lot of research into this area to ensure that we cover all these types of issues.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. Just for clarity on my point, we've mentioned in this report, and I'm sorry that we're getting bogged down with this one, but we mentioned obviously the possibility of having more vehicles. Right? So all I'm suggesting is that instead of having two locations and taking away parking from here, where I think it's going to be taken away anyway when the building starts happening next door, is if we just had all of our charging stations at Public Works. And I understand that the building inspector works here, but it would be a 3-minute drive from Public Works to here, and then that charging station could be used by anyone in the future. That's my point. And I get what you're saying, Councillor Vic. Have it here and at Public Works. Inevitably, if we're going to have it here, we're going to have it at Public Works as well. I just think that I'm talking about freeing up spaces and moving it all into one location. And I don't know if that was discussed or if it's even an issue.
Right now, all our building inspector and all our bylaw officers park here, and they park here every night because this is where they operate out of. So if you put it up at Public Works, you'd have the same problems as when it's over at the tourist center, that whole loss of time, having to go get his vehicle, having to go charge it, right? Rather than being able to charge while he's in his office working, then he can go hop in it and go to a site. This charger will be just for city only. It'll be marked city only, so we won't have other people using it. We are losing part of our parking lot, but we will be parking down over by the library. It's not like we won't still be using this parking lot for our staff and employees.
Go ahead, Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. In closing, you got me on the he can charge it while he's working bit. I think I was just wrapping my head around it charging overnight, right? And I didn't see, it being 3-minute drive or that much, but I can see having to charge it during the day as he's been booking around all over. That makes sense. Thanks for the clarity.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Elliott. Before I go to Councillor Runge, I do have a question for staff, and that is, has any consideration been given to the potential of having 1 or 2 charging stations in the city-owned parking lot on the south side of St. Laurent Avenue across from City Hall?
So at this point, I believe our manager Blair is looking at EV charging across the city, but we haven't given any consideration to that at this point, but she is looking at that type of stuff.
I think it's something that should be considered. I mean, I would think that the hike from City Hall across the street to the parking lot behind Big Country Printers on St. Laurent Avenue is probably equal to the hike to the corner of the existing City Hall parking lot behind the City Hall. Just a thought for consideration. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. The Director Bolton was actually correct. Sorry, not actually. Director Bolton is correct. We are working on a larger plan to talk about where there's chargers. There's obviously concerns about publicly owned chargers. Do we want to be in the business of having chargers versus encouraging the private sector to do those chargers, like is happening quite rapidly throughout the city? So lots of discussions there. We did discuss that point of that would be a good location. It would potentially be a location, maybe visitors would use it as well. But we think we need that bigger overall plan to really get a sense of it rather than one-off decisions. The reason for the one-off decision tonight is because we have our first electric vehicle at City Hall. The person works here, we need it here, right? But the bigger decision still needs to be made about what's the city's plan moving forward.
Thank you. If I could just add my editorial comment, I don't think that the city should be providing electrical charging facilities for the general public. I don't see too many city-run gas stations around. Do we have any more discussion on this before we move, I'm sorry, Councillor Runge?
Sorry, and I invest in EVs and all sorts of stuff heavily, but we may be putting the cart before the horse here. Costs of these are going down. Everything is still changing. We don't have a policy yet. We purchased a vehicle that we paid, if it's a Toyota, I'm thinking, what, 20 or 30,000 bucks more than the other vehicle. Now we're adding an extra 20,000 bucks to maintain this vehicle. Have we done the cost analysis for ourselves here to say, hey, are we actually ahead, or are we just looking like we're, because we have a green vehicle? It goes back to everything we've talked about before, and it's not to belittle the vehicles. It's just we're small. We're a small community, and if we make the wrong choice here, that's 20,000 in the wrong location. That's my fear, I guess, here. And I'm not sure if that was discussed at your meeting. I don't. That's the idea of having our building inspector drive to the works yard. And he would have enough charge over the night. I think it's 400 kilometers or something like that. I don't know if he drives more than 400 kilometers a day, but I'm sure we could easily find that out. If he's not driving 400 kilometers a day, then that's a location that would actually work beneficially to our community going forward for all sorts of vehicles. I guess that's where, just
Okay, I see no more questions coming forward. I wonder if we can we do have a motion on the floor, and it's duly moved and seconded. So I will now call the question on the resolution. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you for that. That was a bit of a long discussion, but I think a valuable discussion as well. Now I'm going to go to cities. We have no council reports and discussion items, but I am going to city staff reports and admin report 53/24 surplus 2024. Director Bolton.
Thank you. It's actually surplus 2023. So the purpose of this report is to review the 2023 surplus and deficits for the city's operating funds and allocate the general surplus. So the Financial Sustainability and Audit Committee reviewed this report at their March 27th committee meeting and recommends the allocation of general surplus that's included in this report. So after operating and capital carry forwards, so that's projects that began in 2023 and will be completed in 2024, the general surplus for 2024 was $1,172,177 before the adjustments for the asset retirement obligations. Now, I've included a variance below in this report to kind of show what the big issues were. One of the largest by far was the RCMP, and just because they're challenged in getting enough personnel here, so we had budgeted for 23, and they came quite a bit under, so you can see that's one of the largest variances. Another large one is just interest rates. Obviously, the prime interest rate went up quite a bit over this last year, and that enabled us to earn quite a lot of extra interest income on our funds that we have, so we definitely made a lot more interest income this year. Most of it went to our reserves because it's allocated to them, but some does go into general operating. So the water fund and the sewer fund, we keep 6 months of surplus in their surplus fund, 6 months, worth of expenses in their surplus fund. All other funds each year are transferred to the water and sewer capital reserves for projects. This year, the airport had a surplus of $119,794, largely just due to some COVID funding that finished off this year. As part of the budget 2025 process, it was recommended that $100,000 of this be used to lower the airport taxation for 2024, which is what I've built into the operating budget. Transit had a deficit of $24,788. Forestry had a deficit of $32,929, but it was covered by previous surpluses that the forestry fund had, and the forestry fund still sits with a surplus of $204,376 that can be used towards future projects. Solid waste required more funds from the general fund than budgeted in 2023 due to lower than expected landfill revenues. So the fund required $247,441 in funds from the general fund, higher than the budgeted amount. So the recommendation for the 2023 general surplus is to allocate it as follows: to reduce 2024 taxation by $100,000, and this is just from the general surplus. Remember, we also took $100,000 from the airport surplus. To bring the snow reserve up to 30% of the snow budget, so that's $60,266, and then the recommendation is to split the remaining amount to the tax and community stabilization reserve, the capital reinvestment reserve, and to remit the remaining amount in surplus. Those two reserves are required. The capital reinvestment reserve, we've talked a lot about how our 5-year plan has a lot more projects in it than we have funding for it, so it's important that funding go in that. The tax and community stabilization reserve is one we use for a lot of the supplementals and projects that come up over the years, so it's important to keep funding in that one as we have no allocated funding to that project. That's the recommendation.
Thank you for that. So I'm looking for a motion on the recommendation that was just read into the record. Councillor Vic, Councillor Rudenberg, you're seconding? Okay, is there any discussion at this point? Councillor Runs, you're looking at me with a big smile. I'm expecting you to have a question. Any discussion, any questions? Councillor Vic.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So obviously that's a sizable surplus, and I believe we're doing the right thing here with putting a sizable chunk of these surpluses back into the Community Stabilization Reserve and the Capital Reinvestment Reserve for future projects. Also, we do have the looming question of the Johnson Bridge, and I think the way that Director Bolton has allocated this maintains flexibility so that we can act to fund that bridge without depleting, first of all, without depleting every reserve, and also keeping some in surplus allows us to also maintain maximum flexibility to tackle that bridge project, because by the sense that council has on this, we're waiting for communication from other users on the bridge who provide utilities. Those decisions could come very quickly on on what they're going to do, and we need to act quickly. So I think this offers us maximum flexibility to deal with the bridge in short notice.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Vic. Anyone else? Councillor Runge, I knew you'd come in there.
I know, and Councillor Vic might have stolen some thunder. You know what? I'm really happy about this surplus, even though it floors me a little bit that it's so big. But so that interest income penalty / interest income, do we see some more happening next year still?
Yes, so I actually put it in my notes. If you recall at our last budget meeting, we talked about that. So I actually adjusted the 2024 budget to have more interest income in it, and I also adjusted the RCMP. So we adjusted for those two things, looking at 2023, knowing where we landed. We made adjustments to the 2024 budget, knowing what we expected.
Thank you. And then the second, we adjusted landfill also, right, going forward? All right, so I guess the quandary I have here is, we taxed the public last year too much, ultimately. So is there any appetite to possibly move some of that remain in surplus? Because to me, tax stabilization reserve and remain in surplus kind of can be used for the same thing, and maybe make that 500,000 and the rest go to lower taxation to say to the public, look, we had a surplus. These are hard times right now and we understand that with a lot of people in this community. Can we give you a little bit of a nudge this year, knowing that we might still have to take it back from you in the future if the bridge goes, because we're going to have some sort of referendum or something on that. But we're giving back then some of the stuff that we were just really lucky with, that we got, saved all that money.
I guess the one comment I would make is that we've already agreed to use 200,000 towards lowering the 100,000 from the airport and 100,000 from the general. So next year we're already going to have to make up that 200,000. So any more that you use from surplus to lower taxation in 2024, you'll have to make up the next year if you won't have that option again. And as we have discussed, some of the reserves, like the capital reinvestments, need more funding. So this is just a way of getting the funding a bit earlier.
Yeah, and to that, it's just the tax stabilization and the remain in surplus is a nebulous account in my mind. Capital reinvestment is very clean. Hey, we're going into capital. So if it's that way and we don't want to put extra into taxation, I would rather see it earmarked directly to bridge, or I guess that would be capital reinvestment, wouldn't it? And put it all in the capital reinvestment. And then we're saying, look, we are funding for these things going forward directly versus something that a future council may decide for whatever reason to pull out differently, which we've actually paid for today.
One thing I didn't include with this report that I took to FSAC is that our general surplus, our general fund is actually in a deficit of approximately $90,000. Some of that 300,000 would bring the general fund up out of a deficit, right?
Okay, thank you. Do you have anything more? Are you building up to a resolution here, or no? Okay. All right, so is there any further discussion on the resolution that's on the table in reaction to the recommendation? So, Councillor Runge.
So then my question to the rest of council, does it stand like this, or are we okay to move things around slightly? And I guess the question isn't to Kerry, it's to council to see if there's no one in favor, I'm the minority anyway, and then we'll move on.
I have Councillor Vic on my speakers list.
Councillor Runge, I feel what you're saying, because you are right, technically. We overtaxed, and this is the result. We didn't spend enough, and this is the result. And I would tend to agree with you that that should go back where it came from. However, with a $11–12 million bridge on the horizon, I think taxpayers would want us to be prepared for that without liquidating every reserve in the city. So I stand by Director Bolton's allocations here. I think it best allows us to pivot in the eventuality that the bridge needs to be acted on quickly.
Okay, so nothing more before I call the question. And before I do call the question, I want to thank Councillor Vic and his FSAC team and staff as well. I mean, this has been a tough go, and I think that we should be voting in favor of the recommendation. So hearing no further comments, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, now we can go to Admin Report 45B/24, Parking Report regarding Development Permit 2023-63 Development Permit application for a proposed conversion of a commercial building into a 17-unit residential apartment with a parking variance at 668 Doherty Drive. Director Turner to report.
Thank you, Mayor. As you recall, this is coming to you following a public hearing and the initial variance report to Council, where Council requested further detailed information on the parking situation, a technical report from staff. So this is what this includes. It includes a little bit more analysis on the parking situation with respect to the property, as well as you're aware, this has been a long-standing project, has gone through a number of iterations. So there's a number of confusions as to what stage we're at in this. And so I did provide a project detail, project background at the end of the report that kind of goes back to that history. I won't read it in detail, but as you can see, one of the issues was there was in an original application, there was another property that was proposed as parking. In some initial conversations with staff and council, that parcel got removed off the application because it just didn't work for parking. It was backing into alleys and was backing onto streets, and it was determined to go ahead without that in some original applications. As you know, those original applications went against the time barrier and then defaulted. This new application now is for some additional units, and the parking variance was still as requested for the 3 parking stalls. However, there was always discussion with the applicant about having some additional parking opportunities in the area. The applicant has, the proponent, excuse me, has stated that to staff that they are willing to covenant one of their properties, which is right across the street, which is discussed in the report, and to allow an additional 8 parking stalls on that property, bringing the total up to 11. The parking analysis, so that's kind of what we're basing that. I just wanted to give you that history because that's kind of what we're basing on the analysis on at this point. The concerns are obviously any facility residential without parking could lead to street parking. Street parking being a problem in our community because of snow clearing. I mean, that's what we always come down to with regards to residential facilities. We do understand, we've had lots of conversations with the applicant that this property is intended for lower income and for persons that probably won't necessitate a vehicle. We did have some conversations with other providers of low income facilities in the community, and they state about 50% to for low income is kind of a good number for the number of units that require parking. About 30% when it comes to seniors. That's a good, interesting number to hear from those housing providers. At the end of the day, the numbers that the proponent is now, advising that they will provide and covenant to this project would bring us into that number. So, the concerns, I believe, for parking would be greatly reduced, if not diminished, for this facility. The parking, as you see, is on a commercial space. The proponent has purchased. They're not yet sure what they're going to do with the rest of that commercial space, but they will work on that in the future. But it'll have to be recognized. It'll be covenanted on that property that those 8 parking stalls belong to the apartment of the subject 668 Doherty Drive. Any questions? Before I go into, it's a very long recommendation. The recommendation is built off the first variance, which we have to approve first.
Okay, before I go to questions, could we get the recommendation, the motion for the recommendation on the floor, please? Moved by Councillor McKelvey, seconded Councillor Vic. Okay, discussion? No discussion? Councillor McKelvey.
I just want to thank you for the hoops that you've jumped through, everybody, to make this happen, and I'm really pleased to hear that we have a solution. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Councillor Runge.
Yeah, and I'd like to echo that also for the proponent. My only caveat here is that that covenant is absolutely solid, because we've had a covenants on this property before that we're now changing to make room for this, and I think it's going to be hopefully a great new project, but we need to make sure that that parking comes with it, and that if that land ever changes use or changes ownership or whatever, that those pieces of parking, those parking stalls are still available. You know, possibly a future council may see that there are actually no vehicles ever on the road, then that would be totally different. But at this stage, that we still have it there. Thank you.
You can go first, Mayor, if you like. That's fine. I'll go. Okay. Director Turner, would the occupancy be contingent on the parking being ready day one as occupancy?
That can certainly be a requirement on the building permit, for sure. That, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And the comment that I wish to make, and I notice that there are people in the gallery, and I notice that the proponents are in the gallery, but I have to say that since the public hearing with respect to this bylaw has already been held, no one other than council and staff can speak to this, and so therefore council cannot hear any comments or questions from anyone else, particularly the proponents, their counsel, and the general public on this. So I've just given you your notice. So having said that, are we ready for the vote? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, the next item is item number 3. Administration Report 54/24, Business Improvement Levies for 2024. Director Bolton to report.
Mayor?
Yes.
The purpose of this report is for council to approve the 2024 levies for the 3 business improvement areas. So the West Quesnel BIA went through their renewal process this year and has a new bylaw in place for 5 years. The renewal process included copies of the strategic plans and budgets which council saw. The Quesnel Downtown Association and the South Quesnel Business Association were requested to send letters outlining their activities for the year and their budgets for council's approval as required by their bylaws. Those documents are all attached to this report. Each year, the city collects a property tax levy on commercial properties within the identified BIA areas to fund the BIA activities. So the recommendation is that council approve the following grants to the business improvement areas for 2024 to be collected by local service property tax levies, provided all other conditions of the bylaws are met by the business associations prior to payment of the grants. Quesnel Downtown Association, $72,773. South Quesnel Business Association, $80,000. And West Quesnel Business Association, $40,800.
Okay, there you have the recommendation. Am I getting a motion from Councillor Elliott? Moved by, and seconded by Councillor Runge. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. Just a big thanks to all 3 BIAs. Quesnel's lucky enough to have 3 of them. They work together very closely, and they've all done a great job in giving us the information. I'm impressed with all of them, so thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Anything more before I call the question on the motion? I do have a mover and seconder, don't I? Yes, okay, just checking. Never hurts to check. Okay, no more discussion. Any more? So therefore, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. And if someone could call Councillor Rudenberg back into the meeting, please.
I should have stayed there, hey?
Okay, the next item is under, we have nothing coming out of the council information package. We have one item of correspondence, and that is the March 26th letter from the Prospectors Car Club.
Mayor, we stood that down.
And we're standing that down.
Yeah.
Okay, it didn't say that on my agenda, so I just wanted to make sure it stood down until the next regular council meeting. Am I correct? Okay, thank you. So we have no bylaws, we have no new business, information and question period. We have no changes to upcoming meeting schedules. We have no changes to committee appointments. We have no, or at least I have no announcements to future events. Anybody else does? Now I will open the floor to gallery questions. And just remember what I said about that bylaw for the Doherty Street development. So are there any questions or comments? Well, I guess questions from the gallery. Seeing none, then I would ask for a motion of adjournment. Councillor Runge, Councillor Vic, all in favor? We stand adjourned. Thank you.